res sem vesel, da vam lahko predstavim nekoga, ki je od originala, ni indigen, ampak je iz ljudstva Luo v zvezdni državi Wau v Južnem Sudanu. I'm very happy to see you here, Kon. It was a long struggle to get you through these diplomatic obstacles. But now, today, we have chance that we have the answer why it's hunger in South Sudan. If we want to reach Nuba Mountains, the only way possible is through South Sudan. If we want to go to Kumuganza in Sudan, in Blue Nile, or to Fur in Darfur, the only way leading to the indigenous people who are under siege there is through South Sudan, the Republic of South Sudan. We know each other now for 3-4 years, and I like you very much because you are the best of the Southern Sudanese, I can say just like that, openly from my heart. I met many people, of course, in South Sudan. Dinka, Nuer, Shilluk, Zande, the Ngatom and Topoza, and with nobody I can feel so much, I can share my urge to do something, to change something. Even in this country, beside my dear wife, Boyana, I cannot name it somebody that I would say we are nervous together, very, becoming aggressive, even a bit neurotic, yes, I can say this for myself. So it's really relaxing to be able to give you word now. So instead of us as always screaming, you know, together with Amnesty International, thank you for coming. My friend Marko Košnik too, who is my psychiatrist here and there in deadly nights, deadly hours of nights. I would like to give you a word and let you speak the most of the time today. Welcome, please, you students. I'm greeting you with excitement too that you are interested in the story. Please tell me why it's so difficult for us to reach these people on another side. These are photographs from the year 1966 and 7, and it was photographed by the famous Spanish photographer Antonio Corres. He was there about the same time as Leni Riefenstahl, you probably know more here, or George Roger, another two who get interested in these indigenous people across the border in Sudan. Tell me why it's so hard for us to bring a drilling rig to these people, and why it's so hard to bring the news out of the besieged areas in the north, across the border, and how this relates to you. You are Luo, from Luo tribe. Tell us the political situation of South Sudan.
Okay. Thank you very much. As you heard, my name is Kon Victor Dimo, and I'm very happy to have this privilege to be here and talk to you. Very important people, students. I'm also glad to hear that Amnesty International is around, and philosophers and our friend Marko, one of the friends I knew first when I came around. This question is a very compact question. It would take a lot of time for it to be answered, but I will try to be as brief and as fast as possible. The day before yesterday, a journalist, no, it is yesterday, a radio journalist came and he asked me that, please do tell me about your childhood in relation to what is happening today. And it was the first time that somebody asked me that question, and when I started narrating my childhood, my experience of childhood, that is when I started clearly seeing the difference between the situation now in South Sudan and this situation here. One striking things that happened in my, that I would always remember in my childhood with my age mates who are now middle age group is when we used to go to the village, when my father used to come and take us, my father would take us from town, which is Wow, a civilization center, and takes us deep to the village where life is just almost like the one we have just seen now. At least all the children were moving naked, but the elders would put just a cover from front here and from back. For girls, it will be only from front here. Everywhere else is empty and free. But for men, it is in front and at the back. For women, it is like, we call it the bona, half dress from here to here for women. And life was completely different. It was very peaceful. My father, during the holidays, when we finish our school, he takes us to the village. We stay there for 2-3 weeks. We play with my cousins, our age mate. We go hunting in the forest, through natural forest. You know, normally when we move around and I see natural forest, I become very happy. I like it. Because now they are not very common in some places in the world. So we would go, we hunt, we look for honey. You know honey? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Natural honey. We go and get it, and you know the bee in Africa are somehow aggressive, they are hostile. When you approach them, they will start stinging you, biting you, and you have to run, they protect themselves. But you see what used to happen with my cousins, we will go, they know, because they are from the village, they know, we will go, we use smoke so that you don't kill the bee. You use smoke and then they run from the smoke, they go to a corner of their place. And then you don't take all the honey, you take like 75% of the honey and you leave part of the honey, and then you don't kill them, you see, so that they don't run away, they will remain. Next time, after a few months, you can come again and get another honey. It was very enjoyable. We could hunt small animals like rabbit and so on. And then that was in a period of a peace between the first war and the second war, which is the SPLA war, the one she mentioned, the one she mentioned. That's the period I managed to go to school and so on. And then after that, war started. And the war, according to me, was justified because we in the south, in South Sudan, you know, Sudan was a large country with two communities put together, with two different nations put together. We in the south, we were pure Africans, like me, and we are Christians. And the people in the north, they are Muslims, and they are a mixture of Africans and Arabs, and they claim to be Arabs. You see? So there was racial difference and religious difference between us in the south and them in the north. They were economically more developed because the British, when they came, that is where the headquarters was in Khartoum. So they got more opportunities. They got education, they got some civilization, Western civilization, and so on. So when the British left, instead of putting us as two separate countries, they put us together. And there was a relation of oppression. There was no peace between us because they were oppressing us. When the British were leaving, the South Sudanese people of my nation realized that just one colonialism was replacing another one. All the British officials were being changed with Arab officials in the south. So the South Sudanese were not happy, and immediately a war erupted in 1955. That is the war that started before we were born, and I was born in that war. And the war ended. That war ended in 1972, and that is when some of us got some chance to get education. But the war, and this is a very important point, that peace, normally our experience with our oppressors, the Arabs, the recent oppressors, is that when they make an accord, an agreement, they don't do it for the sake of, they don't do it in good heart. They just do it as a tactic. But the agenda has to continue, however much it may take. And the agenda is a very funny agenda. It's a divine mission to Islamize Africa. And South Sudan is in the front line. We are the Christians we are a bit hard to Islamize, because we are Christians. There are a lot of churches, like in Slovenia here, only that our churches are small, they are not concrete like these ones. So they find it hard to Islamize us. They want to finish us very fast so that they can reach Uganda and Kenya and Tanzania. And they will move very fast if they bypass us. So the agenda is normally, they are not happy. They want us to be Muslims very fast. And then when they make a peace agreement like the one of 1972, they just do it temporarily, delaying tactics so that again they will get another opportunity. So when peace of 72 was signed in 1972, after a while they started abusing that peace. And people in the south, my people were not happy again. In 1983, they went to the bush again, when I was a teenager boy now. And then there was oppression, discrimination, racial, religious, and economic discrimination, and so on. I was not happy, and in 1986, I joined the rebels in the bush because of this reason. I wanted equality, I wanted justice. I wanted a country where all of us are equal before the law. Yeah, because in Sudan, in the constitution of Sudan, it is written that Sudan is an Islamic country in the constitution, and Sudan is an Arab country. I am not an Arab, I am not a Muslim. So the implication would be that by law, I am a second-class citizen. And that is what we rejected, so we went and we fought. Peace was signed in 2005. When peace was signed, we expected justice, we expected peace, we expected prosperity. There was a lot of euphoria. The world, the whole world supported us, including the Western world, supported us so much so that we get our independence. We fought, we lost. I lost my elder brother, the one I followed. We went to the bush together with him. He was killed in 1991. My mother died during the war, my father died during the war. My family, that we used to be very happy when we were kids, got completely dismantled. From that time up to today, we have never met again. Those who are alive are very far. I have a sister who's in the US, the other sister died recently in 2008, and then the other brother, we lost him, and everybody is now, we have never met again as a family as it used to be. It has just become a memory, you see. Now, what happened now after the peace is that we were disappointed. It's not only the world that is disappointed, not only you. People are asking me, what happened in South Sudan? Even me, I'm asking. Sometimes I'm asking my colleagues. If you go to my Facebook, sometimes you find when I'm completely disillusioned, I just put a question, what happened? Well, we fought for justice. We sacrificed a lot. Very young people of your age, they died willingly. They knew that they were going to die, but they would go and fight so that we get peace and justice, but we did not get it. What happened? You see? What happened is this here. Injustice is perpetuated. Bad governance. You see? Bad governance. My surprise, and this is maybe you, the students of philosophy, might help us answer this. You find somebody, that is a picture of our president. It's a cartoon, it is me who made it. I do cartoons like this on the computer. I can also draw by pen. And I just do them for my self-consumption. I don't publish them anywhere because no one needs them. In the world of today, my experience is that when I'm in South Sudan, I lost a job and I could not go back to my job because my employer fears me because of these kind of things, because I express myself. I talk about the bad thing that is happening. My employer does not want that. They fear the government. You know, the government will ask them that, why are you employing this bad guy? You see? So currently I'm not working. When I came out from the ministry, I could have gone back to my job because I had a very good relation with them. I was an efficient professional, but they were somehow intimidated by the government. I could not work because of activism. Now, what happened is that when you are struggling against oppression and injustice like our president was, he went to the first war. I was not in the first war from 1955 to 1972, but he was in the first war. He also was a very senior commander in the second war from 1983 to 2005, fighting against oppression, fighting against injustice. Then what happened again? When he becomes a president, he starts doing injustice, not only doing injustice, but doing it and trying with all possible means to justify injustice, to see that it is okay. It is me who is saying, why are you doing injustice? It is me who is bad now, because he's the president. But when Umar al-Bashir was the president, all of us were agreeing, we were colleagues, that Umar al-Bashir is bad. Sudan Islamic regime is bad. This is what surprises me. And that is why I thought I cannot be a politician. Me having been a minister of finance probably was my last experience in politics. I don't wish again to be politics, because I realized that for you to be a politician in Africa and maybe in the world, you have to be very evil. When our government, when I was the Minister of Finance, our governor was sacked, and we were all sacked because he was passionate against killing of civilians. The militia of the president and his soldiers, the soldiers of the government, were killing civilians. You can see in the news and wherever, the people whom they see as opposing to him, he will send militia and goes to go and kill people. My governor was not happy. He was saying, why are our army killing our civilians? He was told to shut up several times by the president. He could not, because these are his subjects. And then he was sacked. Now the point I want to say is that I'm sure if my governor were to keep quiet about the killing of the civilians, he would be still a governor today. I would be still in the ministry today. He would not have lost the ministry and the job and all that. You see, so it's a matter of conscience, your heart. Are you going to accept just for the sake of being in position, in political position? And this is what is happening all over the world. You just want to be in political position at all other costs, whether people are dying, what is happening in Africa, what is happening somewhere, you don't care. What's important is the institution, the rules and regulation of the system. You have to abide by the system. You know, there is a lot of conformity, and the cost of that conformity is that a lot of suffering is happening in various parts of the world, and no one is talking. Now, what is happening in South Sudan is that, you know, when you see the international media, this one is written national.